just by identifying it as purpose, we are engendering a kind of mass self-deception, and we're thwarting people in the very project that they're trying to undertake.
Is self-reflection central then to uncovering meaning and improving our ability to act? Or with this question of, is it just going to make things worse and lead to further unhappiness? John, if I come to you on this, because you've talked a lot about meaning, and within your own project of then dealing with a crisis in meaning, how fundamental then would self-reflection be to that? Or would, as you've already suggested in a sense, it could be this process of kind of, I think you've used the metaphor of creating sort of selves or imagining selves and placing them on your shelves in this kind of glittering way. That could be something that's in fact detrimental.
Yeah. And so I don't want to just try to appropriate what Frank and Isabel are saying, but I think at least it's convergent with something that I'm trying to argue for, that the kind of self-knowledge we're talking about isn't the usual autobiographical or the how am I unique. But I think that point Frank made was excellent. It's more about what is sort of the cultural cognitive grammar that has insinuated itself into the very ways we think. And this is where I'm in agreement with Isabel. Any attempt to understand the self, and I think this actually goes back behind Nietzsche, but earlier people will talk about this too, but any project of understanding the self is to try and understand sort of the fundamental cultural cognitive grammar of intelligibility, how we're just trying to make sense of the world. And then I put it to you that fundamental making sense of the world, or sense making, is the deeper kind of meaning that we're talking about when we use meaning as a metaphor, and like semantic meaning, the kind of meaning a sentence has. But we're trying to point to something with that metaphor, the way a sentence sort of coheres together and connects us to the world, so we can potentially discover truths about the world and correct ourselves in the face of the world. There's this deeper sense-making behavior that's being emphasized for e-cognition. And one of the examples of the cultural cognitive grammar is that, for example, modernity has taken the appearance-reality distinction and understood it in terms of the subjective-objective. You go into the ancient world, the appearance-reality distinction is understood with a completely different grammar, which is the grammar of the one and the many. And it's not that one of these is right and the other is wrong. They fit us to the world in different sense-making projects. And so if what we're trying to do is get an enhancement of this sense-making connectedness to the world, we have to ask ourselves these two questions. Because we still carry, by the way, the one many in us. We still have an up-down metaphor way of thinking too. Abstract is above and concrete is below, and all that sort of stuff. And so you have to step back and ask yourself, in what way is that cultural cognitive grammar impeding our ability to actually be connected, sense-making to the world? And in what way might it be affording it? And how can we intervene in that carefully and respectfully, because we don't have a complete kind of self-knowledge, such that the kind of connectedness that what people are, like, for example, our culture thinks that meaning in life is understood as purpose, because purpose is work towards a goal and a product. That's only one of the four dimensions that we have good evidence for, that people are actually talking about when they're talking about meaning in life. And it's not the most important. There's also coherence, significance, and the most important is mattering, being connected to something that has a reality and a value beyond your egocentric concerns. And you can see how our cultural cognitive grammar, by its very nature, separates us from that fundamental, just by identifying it as purpose. We are engendering a kind of mass self-deception, and we're thwarting people in the very project that they're trying to undertake.
Yes, thank you. Frank, can I bring you in as well? Because I was thinking, in terms of what John's saying about the one and the many, and what you were talking about in terms of the self kind of being enclosed in its own project and seeing everyone else as adversarial. But also, I mean, you've written specifically on the therapeutic turn and this idea that the self gets a kind of perpetual sick note. And in a way, then, is that a further form of sequestering, of withdrawal? Is that part of your argument then?
It is, but it's linked to what John has just said, because see, I don't think the meaning is never an individual accomplishment. It's a cultural accomplishment. And what I dislike about therapeutic culture is that it displaces the search for meaning by a kind of a psychological, sort of aspiration to find a diagnosis or find a kind of way in which existential problems are recast as psychological one. But the problems that we're fundamentally confronted with is that the web of meaning through which the individual self can gain definition is conspicuously feeble. We don't talk, as it happens, we don't talk very much about meaning in most disciplines, except in a cursory kind of, very kind of superficial kind of a way. And there's a good reason for that, which we haven't mentioned yet, which is, at the end of the day, meaning is a moral accomplishment, not just a cultural accomplishment. And if we are discouraged from embracing a language of morality, if the language of morality is regarded as kind of old-fashioned, sort of irrelevant, no longer important, then, and if it basically believe that judgment, the act of judgment, is oppressive, and we kind of celebrate non-judgmentalism, then everything to do with the forging together of a web of meaning that could bind us together, because it's in the course of binding us together into a common vocabulary, is undermined. And under those circumstances, our quest for self-knowledge is very much inhibited. It faces all kinds of obstacles, because it basically means that sometimes you and I, when we discuss, we speak a different language, you don't really understand each other. There's no clear point of contact, certainly, at the level of what is right and what is really and what is wrong. And for me, therefore, in terms of going back to the Cultural Revolution, meaning plays a really crucial role, because meaning is the foundation on which things like solidarity, and the solidarity underpinning relations, which are important for self-reflection, all these things are constituted on that. So the more we talk about meaning, and I joked earlier on, well, what is the meaning of meaning? The better. My least favorite expression that is used in the self-help book or on TV is whenever they exhort you, be the best version of yourself. Every time I hear that, I feel like getting a metaphorical machine gun, because the idea that somebody is the best version of yourself, it really deprives us of the responsibility for creating ourselves, because there is no version of ourselves that's ready-made. I mean, the fact that the only version that we could be the best of is the one that's given to us, is the one that kind of we can buy off the shelf. And I think that kind of short-circuits the process of meaning creation.
Yes, thank you. I mean, in terms, Isabel, of this, what Frank's talking about as well, this idea of the common vocabulary, and you mentioned questions of language and the self and how these words would actually relate to what's going on. And I was thinking you've done a lot of work into the psychoanalysis of AI, and that's an incredibly fundamental aspect of how we all see ourselves now. But is that also a question then of how a formal system would relate to selfhood? And thinking particularly of ideas of copying consciousness, copying the self into an AI system, hypothetically. Is that going to be conceivable even at this level of how a formal system relates to a reality?
Yeah, well, there's many aspects to that question. It's really interesting, but I think the easiest way into kind of grappling with some of the implications of that question is to think about language, as you say, and to understand the human and the idea of any sort of form of intelligence as one that is only arrives through language and arrives through the symbolic. So, of course, the point about psychoanalytic meaning or psychoanalytic knowledge is that it's gained through language, and all of our senses of meaning are through language. But of course, when I say language, I don't just mean the spoken word or even the written word. I mean the fact of abstraction, and I mean the fact that it's possible to create formal systems and abstract them from the materiality of human life. And we've been doing that for millennia. But of course, we're at this particular moment now where we have formal systems who operate at extreme and exponential speeds and in complexities that are very difficult for us to comprehend. But these are things, nevertheless, that are operating in conjunction with our forms of intelligence and our ways of trying to comprehend. And they are related to each other. Yet we need to be very careful and clear about how exactly we're allowing artificial intelligence to interact with us in terms of our subjective constitution. And, we've talked about different forms of intelligence. This is another question that is very intimate to my work, but it's the idea of not just having this preconceived idea or reified idea of what intelligence is, as if it's this thing that human beings just have. And we need to make a distinction here, I think, between the idea of intelligence and consciousness and self-consciousness, because they're very different concepts and they entail very different questions. And what is, I think, really important to make the distinction between, for example, our notions of AI intelligence and our notions of human intelligence is that human intelligence involves a body in language. And it's this question of a body in language which puts this immediate sort of spanner in the works and this split between the materiality of the body and the distance between the abstraction of meaning. That is this very difficult traversal that we have to make when we're thinking about human thought and self-reflection, which is a completely different reality when we're thinking about how that functions in artificially intelligent forms of thought.
Thank you, yes.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.